Sequels can be pretty nerve-wracking as a fan of any piece of media. Sure, they can give you more of what made you fall in love with it in the first place, but they can also be worse in every conceivable way. Sequels like Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze take the good elements of its predecessor and enhance them tenfold, whilst also removing any issues that its predecessor may have had. Whereas sequels like Chibi Robo Ziplash strip away everything that made that predecessor beloved to begin with. A bad sequel doesn't necessarily have any sort of impact on the games that came before it. A string of bad sequels can give a certain series a reputation, but a bad sequel can also help nurture more of an appreciation for what we had before it. But when it comes to a game or series that you love, a bad sequel can be devastating. So, considering how much of my personality is made up of my adoration for PokéPark Wii, the mere existence of this game terrifies me. I have never played PokéPark 2, partly because I only got it 2 Christmases ago, but also partly because of a deep-rooted fear that this game wouldn't live up to the original. But that changes today. Hey, what's up? It's your boy Rawk. My time has come. It's finally time for me to play the sequel to one of my favourite games of all time. I didn't know numbers could give me this much anxiety. Why yes, Christ did get a sequel! Was it any good? PokéPark Wii is one of those games. One of the games that the general public looks at and says, ew. While I look at it and say, get in my f***ing pants! PokéPark Wii is a great game. It's a simple, cute adventure that absolutely oozes charm, and offers a unique serenity that not a lot of other games in the Pokemon series ever have. To me, this game is pure escapism, a portal into a gorgeous, consequence-free world of pure, uncomplicated fun, accompanied with some stunning vistas along the way. Of course, nobody agreed. Even at the time of its release, this game received pretty negative reviews, most citing not enough content, not enough depth, not enough fun. And hey, while I obviously disagree with this, I can't even say that these reviewers were necessarily wrong. If you're looking for something on the level of mainline Pokemon games, this game would probably disappoint you. I don't like the mainline Pokemon games though, so I thought this was f***ing great! This game reportedly sold 1.25 million units, which is definitely decent for a game of its type, but compared to the tens of millions the franchise is used to, that seems pretty low. So when you combine that with the pretty poor reviews, how the f*** did this happen? PokéPark 2, released on March 23rd, 2012 here in the UK. Oh, sorry, PokéPark 2 Wonders Beyond, because Pokemon Black and White were the newest mainline games at the time, so they took their initials and pulled a sneaky on us. Upon release, this game also managed to garner pretty mixed reception, for a lot of the same reasons as the first game. So, who knows? Maybe I'll end up loving this game after all. PokéPark 2 opens up in hell, where legendary Pokemon Reshiram and Zekrom are discussing a great disaster that is sure to bring an end to the PokéPark, and that their only hope of salvation is one tiny light that might hope to end the disaster. You know, light-hearted shenanigans, as we should expect. We then cut to Pikachu, who is meeting back up with Piplup to return to the PokéPark, but Charmander and Chikorita are nowhere to be found. After the whole being pushed into a void situation, it seems fair that Pikachu would reevaluate their friendship status. The game takes us through all of the tutorials that the first game did, and quite frankly, I found this offensive. Bitch, do I look Like I need your tutorials. After that, we get a nice little introduction to all of the PokéPark and all of the locales we'll be exploring in this adventure. When we arrive in the PokéPark properly, we notice a bunch of people creaming themselves about the Wish Park, and not being ones to not conform, Pikachu and Piplup follow the crowd to see what all the fuss is about. Along the way, we're interrupted by Oshawott, who has nothing of note to say, but I'll allow it because he's one of my top 3 favourite Pokemon. Look at him. I love him. Anyway, we head to the Wish Park through this fun portal, only to discover that things here are I mean, the creepy dollhouse music and the purple aura emanating from this place should have been a giveaway, as should the fact that the people running it are the Gothita Revolutionary Line and Cofagrius. But what really sells us on that idea is a motion-controlled minigame. Oh, you sick bastards! The main attraction here is Cofagrigus' cake, and before you make a Google search even Jesus wouldn't forgive you for, I'm obligated to tell you that I'm referring to a minigame in which you have to try and make as many cakes as possible within a time limit. And your prize for doing so is being able to eat the cakes. But, turns out, the cakes are having some pretty wacky effects on the Pokemon who eat them, seeming to put them under some form of hypnosis, and after we realize this, Cofagrigus drops the facade and straight up tries to force this cake upon us, before, oh hey, Oshawott's back. As if our day wasn't going miserably enough, these giant demon hands appear from the sky, and we have to try and outrun them to return safely to the PokéPark, but Piplup is too slow and sacrifices himself to save Pikachu and Oshawott. If you ever feel bad about the choices you make, just remember you could always be sacrificing yourself for a fucking Pikachu. So, our quest becomes clear. We have to try and save Piplup from the Wish Park, whilst unraveling the mysteries of what is actually going on there. But we can't do it alone. Not only do we need the power of friendship, as firmly established by the first game and every anime known to man, but we also need the help of Oshawott, who joins Pikachu on his quest as a playable character. Look at him. I want to be him. For the first time in the PokéPark series, we get to explore the world as someone other than Pikachu. Sure, we got to play as our friends in the attractions in the first game, but here we get to play as Oshawott any and everywhere our hearts desire, which is really cool. Not only because Oshawott is an objectively better Pokemon than Pikachu, but also because he has unique abilities, which I'll touch on more later. Now, Oshawott works for Samurott, and their joint goal is to protect the Pokemon of the Cove area, and a large part of this mission involves rescuing the many Pokemon who have entered the Wish Park and never returned. We head into town to interrogate Sandile and Krookodile, who were the ones rallying the Pokemon to the Wish Park in the first place, and we learn that in order to open the portal to the Wish Park, you simply have to wish for it to open. Damn, I don't even need a shooting star? We return to the Wish Park to confront Cofagrigus properly. He says the spell everyone is under will only be broken if the bell rings. And the bell will only ring if we can defeat him, which leads to us playing his new and improved attraction, destroying his cake, and eventually us battling him. There's a lot to unpack here. So, the attractions here are a bit different to the ones in PokéPark Wii. Rather than being quick, bite-sized minigames, these are a bit more lengthy and a bit more involved. Or at least as involved as motion-controlled minigames can be. This sounds like an improvement, and on the surface, it is. But it comes with a cost. Before heading back to Wish Park, I was sure to make a lot of friends all over the beach, as the first game taught me that Pikachu isn't always the best Pokemon to handle the attractions. And for something like making the most cakes, I have to imagine a Pokemon like Frillish or someone would be better equipped. So let's just pick them for this minigame. Oh no. In the attractions, you only get to play as one of the 4 playable characters, because yes, spoiler alert, there are 2 more. I wonder who they could be. You aren't able to play as any of the friends you've made out in the PokéPark. So what the f*** was the point in making those friends to begin with? Well, I'll tell you what the point was. This shit's the point. In order to have enough wish energy, I guess, to open up the Wish Park, you have to enlist the help of your friends. That's all they're good for. To open each portal, you need a certain number of friends, so there's your incentive. But once you have enough Pokemon on your side to open the portal, there's next to no point in making new friends anymore. Also, they removed the best friend system that the first game had, wherein challenging a Pokemon to a second, harder skill game would make you best friends, as denoted by a rainbow book in the PokéPark pad. But here? Nah, best friends don't exist. This is reality. And the worst part of all of this is that within the attractions, the 4 Pokemon you can pick from are identical in terms of how they play. On the one hand, this eliminates the strategy involved with picking a Pokemon and trying to make sure you have the best one for the job, which is painfully disappointing. But on the other hand, it makes me less devastated about not being able to play as your friends, because at that point, there'd be no point anyway. This just makes the attractions and the friend-making system feel so shallow and honestly, kind of pointless. The attractions here are used for progression, much like in the first game. And after we defeat Kofagrigus, he tells us that there are 3 more areas with 3 more attractions. Let me just give some context so everybody who's not up to speed on PokéPark lore can understand how fucking twisted that sentence was. PokéPark Wii had 8 zones with 14 attractions, whereas this game has 3 zones and 3 fucking attractions. How? I mean it. How did they f this up so badly? The zones and attractions are literally the entire point of the first game. The core gameplay is nice, slow-paced, and relaxed, so the big, luscious environments are designed to take full advantage of that, while offering a lot of visual variety, whereas the attractions exist to offer something a bit more action-packed and a lot more involved to supplement that core gameplay and shake things up every now and then. So, how are you going to reduce all of that by an accumulative 70% and have the audacity to call this game a sequel? Okay, maybe I'm being a bit too harsh, a bit too knee-jerky. So, let's give this game the benefit of the doubt. Let's play through the rest of it and see what else it has to offer. The first zone, or as the game now refers to them, area of the game is the Cove area, where we've spent all of our time so far, which consists of the beach and the town, the latter of which acting as a pseudo-hub world, similar to the meeting place from the original PokéPark. The next area is the Arbor area, which is... it's the fucking meadow zone again. This is a luscious forest area, complete with a big windmill, and this is where we meet our third playable character, Snivy. The third area is the Crag area, a mountainous area, and to its credit, this area looks and feels really distinct and honestly, really damn cool. It gives me vibes of Ocarina of Time, weirdly enough, but that's definitely not a bad thing. This is where we meet our fourth and final playable character, Tepig, which, rather predictably, means we get to play as all of the Generation 5 starters. You know, this was actually foreshadowed pretty nicely in the opening. When each area had its little flyover, we see each of these 3 Pokemon running around and are the secondary focus alongside the bird Pokemon that's front and center. And then when we're shown the town area, we see the second stage evolutions of these 3 Pokemon hanging out with Raichu, to symbolize that the 4 Pokemon below them in their respective evolutionary lines are going to team up with each other. And it's also foreshadowed by owning the game literally at all. The final area, of the main game at least, is the tech area, which is by far the coolest one thematically, taking place in a warehouse full of old trains. I genuinely adore this area. Each of the main areas have equivalents in the Wish Park, which is where the 4 attractions are found. And once you've played through these attractions, that's pretty much the end of the game. So, now that we've talked about everything in pretty broad strokes, let's get into the nitty-gritty specifics, starting with the gameplay. Each of the 4 playable characters play completely differently on the overworld. Pikachu is as basic as ever, but the others offer unique abilities that warrant choosing them over the yellow rat. Being a water-type Pokemon, Oshawott is naturally able to swim, which really allows these worlds to feel a lot more open and free. There's definitely a smaller amount of water in this game compared to the first one, most likely because there's a smaller amount of areas, which does make this ability feel pretty wasted, but it's utilized well enough in the areas that do feature water to make it feel warranted. Snivy is able to run significantly faster and jump significantly higher than the others, making her the uncontested champion of traversal. And Tepig, while being a bit slower than the rest, is powerful enough to break through massive boulders. A lot of this stuff is really situational, especially with Tepig. But just having a reason to pick one character over another made this really fun for me, in all honesty. The game has 2D sections every now and then, which feel like they take advantage of each character's strengths and weaknesses much better in my opinion. And with there now being 4 different Pokemon of 4 different types, the game now introduces type advantages from the mainline games to help add just that little bit of extra strategy to the battles, which alongside all of the other skill games, return from the original game. So on the whole, the gameplay here is probably better than it is in the original. I did notice a lot more floatiness and a bit less precision when it comes to stuff like turning while running, but it wasn't like a huge issue. What is a huge issue though, is the fact that Pikachu no longer does a flip at the peak of his jump. Absolutely unplayable! One thing that really strikes me about this game in comparison to the original is the music. This game has a much more fully orchestrated score, and a lot of the music has a much more grandiose feel to it. And man, I just do not know how I feel about this. For stuff like the title theme and the opening music, this fits incredibly well, but then for places like the beach, which have these epic orchestral scores being juxtaposed against the mundane, more low-key environments, it feels really off. In a lot of cases, the music just doesn't seem to fit. I get that the orchestrated score gives this game an air of significance that the first game arguably lacked, but at least for me, the reason I liked the music so much in PokéPark Wii was because of how unastounding it was. Despite how gorgeous they were, the zones in that game, all things considered, were nothing grand. They weren't a kingdom on the brink of ruin, they weren't a desert plagued by floating pyramids and frigid temperatures. They were just a forest, a beach, a cave. They were uninteresting in the most interesting way possible, and the music felt very fitting for that. Now, of course, areas like the tech area in this game are a lot more grand in terms of spectacle, so the orchestral score fits perfectly there. But when we have another forest and another beach with big booming soundtracks, it just doesn't sit right with me. That's not to say the music is bad at all, far from it. The themes are all really pleasant and catchy, and the battle music in this game is an absolute masterpiece. But on the whole, the music just doesn't feel like it belongs most of the time. But one area where I will 100% praise the music, and hell, the game itself, is the loading screens. God, this restaurant kicks ass! Have you seen their menus? Much like the first game, the loading screens most often feature the playable characters just dicking around, being adorable, and the music is suitably playful in the same way the first game's was. But sometimes, what the characters are doing will change to match what's going on in the story, and as such, the music will change just slightly. It's the same melody, but it changes the pitch and progression of the notes in a way that adds such a layer of tension and uncertainty. It's absolutely fantastic. Could you imagine if they were blue? So, the gameplay and sound design of this game are both a mixed bag, especially when compared to the original, but they're not all that PokéPark 2 has to offer, so let's talk about the story. Would it surprise you to learn that that's also a mixed bag? PokéPark 2 has a much bigger emphasis on story than PokéPark Wii did. In that game, the only threat was the ambiguous lack of friendship in the PokéPark, which was going to cause the Sky Pavilion to fall and destroy the park entirely, which I actually liked as a narrative device, but this game has more of an actual tangible threat to the Pokemon. That being Darkrai. He's the one behind the curtains of the Wish Park and sends out 4 spooky looking Pokemon to handle the 4 zones within the park, akin to the gatekeepers in the first game. Once we've defeated all 4 of them, we face off against Darkrai, who erases the memories of Oshawott, Snivy and Tepig and separates the gang among the PokéPark, which sends Pikachu into what can only be described as a deep depression. This feels pretty dark for a kid's game. It's definitely played up for some semblance of comedic effect, but there's also a lot of sincerity in this scene. It wants you to take it seriously. And I just can't. But it turns out Piplup is okay! And that fact alone is able to bring Pikachu back to his normal self and gives him the motivation to go restore the rest of the group. We return to where we befriended each member of the trio, and we rekindle our friendship. We're stronger than ever and are ready to take down Darkrai. We fight Darkrai twice, and after we defeat him both times, a rift begins to form in the sky, which threatens to devour the entire PokéPark. The only way to put an end to this is for the 4 playable Pokemon to ring each of the 4 bells in the Wish Park. And in a last-ditch attempt of salvation, Darkrai sacrifices himself to close the void, and the PokéPark is saved. This story is honestly pretty decent. It had some genuinely good beats in there, and an honest attempt at heartfelt emotion. The encounters with Darkrai kind of outstay their welcome, and the whole void thing feels pretty forced, but on the whole, I enjoyed this plot. And then it kept going. Yeah, contrary to what most people who've played this game may believe, the game doesn't end with the credits. Figuring that Darkrai's sacrifice makes him worthy of being befriended, the gang head to a couple of new sub-areas throughout the park in order to befriend Tornadus, Thundurus, and Landorus, who are able to transport us to where Reshiram and Zekrom reside. Both legendaries agree that Darkrai doesn't deserve to be freed from his fate, but are willing to hear us out if we're able to defeat them in battle. And once we do so, Darkrai is saved and the game is truly over. That was a whole bunch of padding. Look, it's cool that we get to work alongside these legendary Pokemon, and the redemption of Darkrai is narratively pleasing, but the way in which we get to that point just feels fine. So that was PokéPark 2, the direct sequel to one of my favorite games of all time. I don't know how I feel about this game. On the one hand, it removes a lot of what I enjoyed so much about the original game, and downplays certain elements in a way that feels objectively worse than the way the first game handled them. But on the other hand, it does introduce a lot of things that I really enjoyed, and that add a lot of depth to the adventure. As a game on its own, this game is honestly really good. It's definitely not to everybody's taste, but I am obviously not everybody. I enjoyed my time with this game, and looking at it in a vacuum, I'd be pretty happy to recommend other people to play it. But I don't get to look at this game in a vacuum. The whole time I was playing this game, all I could think of was, man, PokéPark Wii did this so much better. PokéPark Wii had a much more interesting approach to this. PokéPark Wii was just more fun. I can say with no uncertainty that I vastly prefer the original. But that doesn't mean that PokéPark 2 is inherently bad. It's a good game, and I really like it. But compared to PokéPark Wii, it can be woefully disappointing. It's underwhelming as all hell as a sequel, but great as a game on its own, and because of that, I think I'm always gonna have pretty mixed feelings about this game. But at the end of the day, I'm glad I finally played this game. And who knows, maybe the same could be said if I play the sequel to another one of my favourite games of all time. Over my dead f***ing body!